So we're going to get started right now looking at each LEED credit one by one, looking at the points, looking at how they're organized, etc. And just the way this is going to be structured, we're going to start by discussing the intent of each credit. We're going to look at the strategies of how one might achieve the credit, and then we're going to look at the requirements of what is measured and what is needed to prove that you've made it. And we're going to start with sensitive land protection. Those of you who are super experienced might notice that I skipped a particular LEED credit, and I'll come back to that later. There's lots of reasons why I did that. So the intent here of the land protection basically is to why build on beautiful sites or sites that have intrinsic value, either from an aesthetic or from an ecosystem services point of view. Why not build in places that are not sensitive? And so the basic strategy here is, and we talk about this a lot, is if you're a sustainable designer, you always want to get working with the client well before they've selected the site. Not just because you want to avoid sensitive land, but also because there are orientation opportunities and ways in which you might think about achieving sustainability, which is a lot of this is going to be covered in this section. In this particular point, which is worth 1 point, obviously you want to locate buildings that have been on previously developed land. So you either want to find a parking lot, for example, is a great example of what you want to do. And here you want to, of course, avoid building in prime farmland, floodplains, habitat, etc. I'm from Philadelphia. We live right near an area called Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which has some of the best soil in the world for growing crops. And we're always saddened when yet another new building comes up and removes that soil from the opportunity. High priority site. So 2 points here, and you'll notice that different credits have different points, which emphasize, which is USGBC's way of emphasizing importance. Here you want to do is you want to basically help the overall health of the ecosystem by thinking about where you're going to locate your building. And so we don't really want to build in a green field which has never been touched in a long time. We want to minimize our environmental impacts. So the strategy there is to work with your client and begin to educate them, hopefully they're already educated, and try to find sites that actually could meet some of these ideas, like an historic district. So what USGBC is suggesting here is try to build in a historic district, or build in an economic empowerment zone, or build on a brownfield. So this is like what I call a virtuous cycle. It's not just building a green building, but it's actually removing, in some cases like the brownfield, negativities that might exist in the ecosystem. Or it's leveraging ideas or initiatives that are already in place so that you're building overall momentum. Now 5 points here for surrounding density and diverse uses. And obviously the idea here is to conserve land by building in the urban centers in diverse areas so that we could actually, and for the US this is kind of a big deal, you could walk from your house to, say, the dry cleaners or the marketplace, or you could walk to a movie theater. And I know for those of you who are in my course from other countries, this one seems kind of ridiculous. However, we have a lot of need for this in this country. And again, the idea is don't build on green sites. LEED is doing everything it can and giving as many points as it can to get you to build in an urban environment. And the requirements simply are to prove that you've built your building and your site within one of these diverse and dense locations. And then going right along with that, usually if you get that one, you're going to get this one, which is another 5 points for quality transit. And it's sort of the same idea. If we can get people to take mass transit as opposed to driving, we're going to reduce impacts on the ecosystem out there in the world. And again, if you're not from the US, this might seem trivial, but here in this country, it's actually a really big deal. We've had to deal with 50 years of suburbanization, and we're now beginning to reverse that trend. And LEED has actually helped to do that. They've encouraged people to build in urban centers. So when we think about a LEED gold building, there's actually so much more that goes into it, so much more thought, and so much more ideas about how we build and where we build actually has great impact on not just the environment, but on the future of how we think about building in the environment. And so some of the strategies are, well, obviously build near public transportation. And again, working with your client before they've selected a site is really critical so that you can help them gain, not only gain these points, but actually have the kind of impact that you want to have. And what LEED would like you to do is be a 1/4 mile from a trolley or a bus and a 1/2 mile from a rapid transit station, which given the city that you're in might be actually pretty difficult to do. For example, I'm at Philadelphia University, and we're really stretching the boundaries to try to get that. We're right in the middle of the city, but we're also in the middle of a park. So this isn't always easy to get just because you're in a city. Now, my favorite point of all time in the LEED rating system is the bicycle facilities. People laugh at me. They say, well, this is really dumb. You put a bike rack in front of your building and you build a shower and you gain 1 point. And people accuse others of gamification or trying to buy points. And so it is true that if you're 1 point short, I've seen clients where they say, well, we're 1 point short of getting LEED Gold. Let's go ahead and put the showers in and the bike racks in. And that's fine, and that happens. But try to look at the underlying idea of what LEED is trying to do. It's trying to change behavior through encouragement and incentives. And so what LEED is trying to do is reward those people who ride their bikes to work. Now, of course, if you're building a building out in the middle of nowhere, it makes no sense because nobody could ride their bike. But remember, this is not a requisite. This is not a prerequisite. This is an optional point that you can receive. So let's stop hating on this point and start understanding what USGBC is trying to achieve here. And the requirements are, well, you provide for bike storage and you have on-site shower requirements. It's extremely flexible, by the way. On our campus, I happen to be in a LEED Gold building and we have our bike racks right out front. However, we use the showers down at the gym, which is about 1/8 of a mile away, and that was acceptable under the LEED standard to provide a shower. Now, we all, especially in this country, lament the amount of parking that we have, and there are many big box retailers that will actually exceed the local zoning control for how much parking we have. So, so what we're trying to do here is, that looks like the wrong intent. If that is true, I apologize for that. But obviously we're trying to reduce parking, which is trying to reduce the amount of impervious surface, which creates runoff and pollution. And so one of the strategies here is that, and I've seen this done with many sustainable designers, is they partner with their local municipalities. They tend to try to understand LEED, understand what we're trying to achieve, and begin to advocate for less parking on the site. Or, as a strategy, we try to share parking across functions. So for example, if you have a church that's only using their parking on Sundays, and then we have a company that's open Monday through Friday, could we share parking? Could we reduce the amount of impervious surface? And the requirements then are, obviously do not exceed the local code requirements. So Target or Walmart or Best Buy are actually in a big problem here to try to achieve that. And then reuse parking spaces by varying depending on site. I also think this is a tremendous point for the future of humanity, at least in the US. And green vehicles, of course, here what we want to do is we want to encourage the use of hybrids, plug-ins, and other green vehicles. And the way that's done typically is, for example, we will design in charging stations in the front of our buildings, or we'll have parking spaces that are placed, 5% of all parking spaces will have a hybrid spot. One of the great disappointments for me over the past few years living in Pennsylvania is that, well, first of all, a great thing was Pennsylvania has been a leader in LEED construction, and all of the rest stops along the along the parkways met LEED, and we always had these great hybrid spots right in front. The problem, though, of course, is after you've got your LEED certification, some people go back and remove those spots and make them regular spots. It was very disappointing to see that happen. And this is the end of the video. So I hope that you have a deeper sense of how location and transportation can impact sustainability. I'll be looking at LEED for sustainable sites next, and we'll look forward to seeing you for that.